Hi everyone, welcome to Happy to See Me. This is the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. My name is Erika Casupanan, and most folks know me from reality TV. So today, I had the pleasure of talking about the overlooked parts that come with having been on a reality dating show and now giving relationship advice. But first, I love to start every episode with sharing something that I was happy to see that week. So this week, what I was happy to see is I got a couch. Okay, I know that might not seem like a big deal to everybody else, but to me, it's about what the couch represents. Folks who follow me on social media know that I have just moved. I've been documenting the furnishing and all of that fun stuff of this new place. What I didn't mention on social media was I have moved into a brand new building, and that means that there are deficiencies. Those are things that start to go wrong or need a bit of fixing after you move in. And when I moved into this apartment, I had barely any furniture. I had one comfortable chair that was sitting in the living room, and I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to sit until I get my couch. And then shortly after I move in, when I start hanging up my clothes in my closet, the closet shelves fall out and all of my clothes go crashing down with it. And this just broke something in me. This created so much weird tension, a bit of stress, actually no, a lot of stress over the next few weeks, because since I couldn't hang up my clothes, the only place I could put them was on my one comfortable chair in the living room. So then my living room then became this place that was filled with boxes and this mountain of clothes. I ended up going on weird existential crises. I'd wonder, do I have too many clothes? Am I not cut out for living alone? Are there too many other things I need to learn about, handiness and maintaining a home and all of that stuff? So who knew that somehow this clothing mountain created all of these weird thoughts for me? Luckily, it wasn't my fault. It was just the closet needed to be fixed. So it eventually got fixed over a month later. I was able to move the physical and psychological baggage of this mountain of clothing into the closet. Oh my gosh, I'm just talking about a pile of clothes, but whatever, just bear with me. This was a weird psychological thing for me. And then now I've been able to clear out the space and put the couch in its home. And now I've been able to have friends over, my family over, and a place in my new home that was once a source of stress and anxiety for me. It is now a place where I can be at peace and I can entertain and I can have a laugh with the people that I love. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to this weird frustration when it comes to moving and not having everything all sorted out. But that is what I was happy to see this week. So thank you to the couch. Now, in terms of this week's episode, this is a fun one. I'm speaking with Joynt and Andy Levine. The two co-host the podcast Dear Shandy, where they give relationship advice, they recap The Bachelor, and they speak to relationship experts about all kinds of different relationships. And Sharleen used to be on The Bachelor a few years ago now, and she was recently the host of Bachelor in Paradise Canada. So we talk about the experience of watching yourself on TV, the experience of, being in a situation where you feel like you must fall in love with The Bachelor. And we end up revealing that we do have a bit of a special Survivor connection. So make sure you tune in to hear that. This was a ton of fun. So let's get into it. This is Sharleen, Joynt, and Andy Levine. I hope you enjoy it. You have been podcasters who have been giving people relationship advice. Was there a moment in your years of giving advice where you thought, oh shit, people are actually listening to us?
Probably, I think in the first 6 months, when you start a podcast, this, the beginning of a podcast is sort of like asking for one favor after another from people. Mm-hmm. And there comes a point, it's like this inflection point where suddenly you have some of the power and you're calling some of the shots. But there's also this sense of responsibility, because we'll get these comments from listeners who are like, I took your advice and I broke up with my boyfriend. And you're like, oh, okay. And it's not that we don't stand by the advice we gave. In fact, I think 10 out of 10, we think that we gave the right advice. And oftentimes they made a choice for the better thanks to us, but it's still like there's weight on it. You suddenly realize that just with a couple of words, you could be changing the trajectory of someone's life. So, there's a sense of responsibility that comes with that.
I've been a little less quick to tell people to break up.
In the early days, you were a bit more like...
Pretty much every question, I was like, break up. It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, can imagine. You guys are just trying to have, good conversations, make good content, and you're like, oh shit, people are actually really acting on this. So it's important what we put out there and what people see. So naturally, it makes sense that I want to then ask some questions about The Bachelor, because yes, you have been part of Bachelor Nation. And I know that you still do some recaps on your podcasts. And what I love about the way that you approach your recaps is you both think critically about what we're seeing on TV, what the environment is like, and knowing that, there's so much that goes on beyond just what we're seeing on our screens. So now that you've been talking about The Bachelor for a few years, what is one thing that you wish viewers knew about the show?
I mean, I think this is an experience you can probably attest to, having watched yourself back, and you're not playing someone else, you're yourself. And I think Survivor's probably somewhat different. But I don't know, watching myself on The Bachelor, I could watch and be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of who I am, but not in its entirety. It's just one facet of who I am. And in some cases, I would hear my voice uttering sentences I know I never said, or certainly hearing them at a time when I know I didn't say them. For example, me saying I could picture myself falling in love with Juan Pablo in episode 4, when I know I did not ever say that at that time. And so I think part of it was like when I started recapping, which I started doing right after my time on the show. I wrote recaps for 6.5 years, and then we sort of passed the torch over to Dear Shandy. But I wanted people to watch the show through a lens of knowing how manipulated it can be, not necessarily how manipulated it always is, but how manipulated it can be. It's just sort of giving a bit of a benefit of the doubt to people who you want to sort of pounce on and criticize and make fun of and ridicule and judge for many times thinking that they're behaving in a way or saying something that they didn't even do. And I think that it's kind of become one of our calling card. Like, I even love analyzing it. I'm like, look, his face expression here, he wasn't even in that room when he said that. There's a lot to unpack with reality TV. Yeah. And I think sometimes it takes having been on the other side, like in the sausage factory where the sausage is being made, to be able to speak to that. So it's been kind of a cool thing to have taken on.
Yeah. And for anyone considering going on reality TV,
this was your sales pitch.
Yeah, no, I think it's a buyer beware situation, because you are at the mercy of production. And they could say, I want to show that part of them, and the rest not interested in. And that part of you might be your least favorite part of you. So while winning, being on a reality TV show nowadays is kind of like, to some degree, if you're likable or even not likable, severely not likable, it's like winning the lottery. You have to realize that comes with some baggage, I think.
I like that. Severely not likable.
Yeah. You don't want to be just like lukewarm, not likable. That's the worst thing you could be.
Yeah, at least be memorably not likable.
You have to be extremely, with prejudice, not likable.
That's the thing. It's like you have to be at some extreme. I feel like on these shows, it's almost like they pick one part of your personality and they're like, let's turn this up so then it's easy for the audience to understand who this person is in one sentence. Because I feel when I run into people on the streets and they recognize me from Survivor and we start talking, the main thing that people say to me is I'm so different than how I came off on the show. And at least with Survivor, we know that we're signing up to play this psychological game. Whereas I think on The Bachelor, it's probably a more intense version of psychological warfare, because I feel like it's being positioned as, oh, you come here and you fall in love. So you're not expecting the backstabbing and you're not expecting, the manipulation, but it's there in ways that, aren't as overt as on a show like Survivor.
Totally. You definitely know what you've signed up for and you're strategizing from day one. While I feel like with Bachelor, you are suddenly like, wait, am I being talked about? Oh, are you encouraging me to talk about people? It sort of catches you off guard. You think everyone's speaking in code because we're all there to find love. And you start to realize pretty quickly that that's not what it's about. And in fact, if you start crying, the cameras are going to start following you more. And you realize that it's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing versus Survivor, which I think is just a wolf in wolf's clothing.
Well, you can make a case that The Bachelor is more Survivor than Survivor.
Yeah.
Survivor is just about like how hungry and tired can you be and still sort of perform,
and how charismatic and smart and socially intelligent can you be when you're that hungry.
Yeah, it's like basically Survivor is just one big like trying to get picked first for dodgeball or something. Bachelor is the jungle.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would go so far as to say it's harder than Survivor. Let me tell you, we were not hungry.
Oh, no. As far as it's definitely the opposite of the hunger.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it could be taken more personally on The Bachelor, right? At least on Survivor, it could easily be, oh, shucks, the game got to me. They pulled a fast one on me. I got voted out. Whereas getting eliminated on The Bachelor, it's like, wait, so you don't love me? Why not me? That's probably way harder to grapple with.
Yeah, and you can get rejected by the lead and rejected by your fellow contestants.
Well, and
so
also,
everyone can dislike
and
you.
also for you to come to a point where you feel rejected by the lead, you have been led to a place by production. You're talking every day. How do you feel about him? Doesn't he look hot today? Wasn't that such a great conversation? Everything is leading you to a point so that you are firmly planted on a rug that they do intend to pull out from under you. Meanwhile, with Survivor, I feel like every time you go into tribal council, even if you don't think you're getting voted out and you were totally blindsided, that there's a chance, And so I feel like with The Bachelor, they do it on purpose. They make you feel more invested emotionally than you maybe ever would have been otherwise.
I mean, think about when people leave Survivor. How many people are crying in their testimonial when the credits are running?
No, they're usually you guys got me. Yeah. Great job. Great blindside.
What a great experience. Yeah. Like, I'll remember this for the rest of my life.
This was a dream come true.
What a great group of people. And The Bachelor, like, I hate myself.
I'll never find love.
Yeah, I'm going to die alone.
When you're in the moment in those situations on The Bachelor talking to producers, because for folks who don't know, when you have your confessionals or your ITMs in The Bachelor world, you're not just talking to the camera, you're getting interviewed by a producer. So when you're in that moment, are you aware that there's a level of manipulation happening, or are you in the fantasy of this Bachelor is the person I need to fall in love with?
I think that depends on the personality type of the contestant in question, because I do think that there are contestants who, they're like, I do feel myself falling in love, and they're ready, they were ripe for the picking. I definitely was one of those contestants that went on reality TV thinking the producers are the enemy, and I didn't trust anything they told me. I lived in a state of paranoia, and I think it took them a while to get to a point where I could just be comfortable, and I was passed from producer to find the right fit for me. I think I was kind of a pain in the ass, honestly.
Well, it matters. Having a producer who really gets you and wants to honor your story, the content they can get out of you is incredible, and just you trust them and you feel like you can let your walls down. Whereas if you have somebody and you feel like they're not on your side, or they're trying to get whatever storyline they want, it's very easy to then shut down and be like, nope, not gonna go into it with you.
They have to feel like someone you would normally tell this stuff to. Mm-hmm. And that is really good producing, I think, on the producer's part. Yep. Speaking of which, I mean, we do have a connective tissue here. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about it, but...
Okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, so my sister, Andrea, is a producer on Survivor, and I'm pretty sure she was with you for all of your time on Exile Island, right?
Yes. So I talk about that in episode 1 of my podcast. And having Andrea there, I think, was probably the best producer moment. I couldn't have asked for anything better when I was on Survivor, because, on Exile, I'm crying. It was the one thing that I didn't want to do. Yet she was there, and she just met me where I was at. And we ended up having a conversation where she and I are both just bawling our eyes out on the beach. But because of her and her being patient with me and her building trust with me, I was able to talk about so many things. And I still am feeling the impact of my time on Exile, because being there and telling that story of my family changed my life. It changed my relationship with my family. It changed my family's relationship with themselves. All the time, I still have people coming up to me and talking to me about how powerful that Exile moment was. So I always tell your sister every time I'm in touch with her, I'm like, I'm obsessed with you. I love you. You're the best. She was awesome.
Oh, that's so nice. See, that's good producing right there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and I think that it's also, that shines sort of a positive light on, you know, being a quote unquote producer and producing, because it can also come from an authentic place. And I think that's one of the things I've learned in the aftermath of having been on reality TV and becoming friends with some of the producers who I didn't trust at the time, like still texting them years later and knowing that they actually care about me as a human and not just for what I could provide during my time as a contestant. And Andrea, I mean, she speaks so fondly of you and will be like, oh, Erika's so amazing. So it humanizes producers in a way to just think of it that way a bit, which I don't think I've done enough maybe in the past.
Well, you humanize the people who humanize you. So any future producers out there, if you treat us like humans, you're going to get good human content.
Yeah, go figure.
Andy, did you watch Sharleen on The Bachelor before you met?
No, but I did watch her after we met. I mean, just her. I really just fast forwarded to her scenes, but it was very entertaining.
He got a real kick out of it.
Yeah.
So how do you have that first conversation when you're just starting to get to know each other, where I guess it's like the reveal that you were on The Bachelor?
I don't think I did this right, but I don't know. How do you reveal this?
Well, I still don't know if maybe you secretly wanted me.
No, I didn't. Okay, so the night we met in the flesh at an event, and we talked for hours the night we met, and we were so excited about each other. And we already knew that we were going to have a first date. We ended up having a first date literally the next morning for brunch. We just couldn't wait to see each other again. And that evening when we parted ways, I was like, let's do this fun thing where we don't Google each other. Which apparently was the wrong thing to say, because he promptly Googled me.
Let me ask you, if your date on a first date said, don't Google me, would you not Google him?
Of course, that's the first thing you do once you go home.
Yes, thank you.
What if the person said, let's do this this nice thing?
No, that makes them Google more.
I know, trying to romanticize it, I think, makes me feel more skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my big mistake. I think I drew attention to it. And I don't know why I said that, because there was only so many hours between when we parted ways and when we had brunch the next morning. But I was trying to... I don't know. I wanted to be the one to reveal it, and I didn't want to reveal it the night we met.
Did you think I would judge you if you told me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that there's sort of an association thing.
Reasonable.
And, you know, it's different to have gone on The Bachelor than it is to have won Survivor. I think no one's going to be like, oh, you were on Survivor. Oh, you won. Oh, you know, like, oh, you went on The Bachelor. There's a lot of assumptions, especially in those days. I mean, this was 2014. I think that the reality TV space has come a long way in humanizing their contestants. But this was still a time when women who went on The Bachelor were automatically deemed crazy and desperate.
Well, that's interesting you said it, because when I did find out, like, 15 minutes after I said goodbye to you that night, I was pleased, because I was like, wow, first of all, it's such an iconic show. I mean, obviously, it's like, I know what The Bachelor is. Yeah. Everyone knows. It's like on The Simpsons at this point.
You don't have to explain what The Bachelor is. It's true.
Yeah. So, and then I was like, you know what? She's so not the kind of person who goes on the show. Not to disparage the people on The Bachelor. I'm just, you know what I mean. I was just like, I just met a person who the last place on earth I would expect them to be is on The Bachelor. I mean, she's like an internationally acclaimed opera singer. She's just like very... Oh, am I not supposed to say that?
No, I don't know if I'm internationally acclaimed, but okay, thanks.
You are exactly internationally acclaimed.
That's not a secret, right? Charlene is an opera singer.
I struggle with compliments, but yes, please.
You know, like, how else are you defined?
Okay, thank you.
You were international
and
you were acclaimed.
I want to move on from the compliment.
But my point is that when I found out about it, if she was someone else... I never would have thought less of her, no matter who she was. I would have been like, oh, that's cool. You were on a show. Like, why is that bad? It's not bad. Unless I saw the show and she displayed herself very poorly, but then that would be another story. But I found it to add sparkle to her because she was like, oh, wow, she's such an adventurer. She's so willing to try new things and do such a weird thing. Like, that's so unlike her. And it made me feel even more excited about getting to know her rather than less. So it added a certain sparkle when I found out. Not that it helped. Not that I was like, oh, now I'm going to go date her. But it did create another dimension to you that made me realize that you're someone who is kind of a little bit of a paradox and someone who's willing to adventure.
Yeah, in a way, I guess, in retrospect, it's a good vetting system. I mean, if a guy's going to judge you for having gone on The Bachelor, then, next.
I honestly think eventually everybody's going to be on some reality show. There are so many now.
Oh, my God,
they're going to run out of people,
It's true.
It's true.
That's a good Black Mirror episode. Ooh. Yeah, where just like there's a few people left on Earth who haven't been on reality TV. And
Andy, was it ever something that you envisioned for yourself in the future? Like, do you ever see yourself going on reality TV?
Well, as you know, the Golden Bachelor has been announced, and Sharleen and I have not been getting along very well. So, no, I do not picture myself going on any sort of trashy reality TV, but it's conceivable. I mean, we kind of are a little bit like adjacent reality TV, what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So
with the podcast. Yeah, because our podcast is video.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
Slightly.
I had this fantasy for a while that Andy would go on Survivor, but
I can't do it.
No, and then I realized that Andrea working for the show meant that he could never go on. And I really mourned that, honestly, for a couple of months, just because I think Andy would be great.
I need to sleep in a bed.
Yeah, like, was this Andy's dream or was this purely Charlene's dream?
100% my dream.
I never had much interest, to be honest. Yeah. I like after missing one meal, I would just start,
Andy does get very
people.
Hangry.
Yeah. I couldn't operate hungry. I couldn't operate hungry, tired, any of the things. I would be very bad. Unless people liked me because I was so bad.
But actually, I think what would happen is you would be very liked to the point where they would vote you off because they would think he's too likable.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, you need a level of hangry in order to stay in. Be likable, but then do something kind of asshole-ish every now and then.
Yeah. Just annoying enough.
I think I'd just be sullen and cranky the whole time. I don't think that plays well on Survivor.
Okay, totally my dream.
Yeah.
It's dead now. That dream is dead.
Because, Andy, what were you doing before you started podcasting and everything?
I don't talk about what I do.
Andy has not ever revealed what he does.
I don't. I have. So I have
and
had.
He still does it, by the way. It's not like he.
Oh yeah, I've actually had a fairly decent career in a couple of different things, but I'm a pretty private person. Mm-hmm. And I like to be able I like to play both sides. Like I like to be very private and I like to sometimes be public. And I found a nice little equilibrium between those two things. And I'd like to keep it that way. And I just like people to be able to know me, like what I present on the internets. But I don't want them to know my entire bio. I don't need them to know me that intimately, because then it becomes a little weird. Mm-hmm. As it is, the world has become a little smaller. Sometimes we go to foreign countries and there are shandies who recognize us, and it's nice. I like it. And I like the, occasional recognizing. I love our shandies. They're such a diverse group. I love when someone who could be my grandmother is like, I love your podcast. It's just wonderful. But I also like to be able to leave the house sometimes when I look like crap and hate everybody and I just want to be left alone. And I also feel that way about my life. I feel like I want to be able to figuratively leave the house looking like crap and not have everybody know what's going on. So yeah, I don't talk about what I do.
Erika, that might be the most asked non-relationship question.
But the problem is what I've done inadvertently is exactly what Sharleen did to me when she told me not to Google her on the first date. Is now everyone, there's Reddit threads, what does Andy do? So I got what I deserved. And, they can still hypothesize, but I'm not telling. They can find out, but I will not tell them.
That's the thing. When Sharleen is saying, don't Google me, you're thinking, even if you did Google me, there's nothing. Because truthfully, before this interview, I Googled you and I was like, wow, I really have no idea what he does.
It's tough. Yeah, I've made it tough.
He's very self-satisfied right now.
Yeah. There's also like a couple. The good thing about me is if my name was really, very unique, it would be much harder. I'd probably be outed immediately by Google. But there are like a few other Andy Levines. I believe there's a wrestler. There's some guy who, for some reason, he's like a producer.
A TV producer.
He's like 60. Everyone's like, Andy's 61? I'm like, no, I'm not 61. That guy looks nothing
Bachelor.
like me. Yeah, right. It's silver at least. Yeah. But this guy, that's not me, the TV producer. Then there's another Andy Levine who has a podcast. It's not as good as Dear Shandy. I just want to make sure that's clear. But yeah, they just they could try, but I don't think they're going to find out.
So how do you reconcile now that there are people who have dedicated some amount of time to figuring out what you're doing, what you do, and writing about it online?
How do you reconcile that, Andy? I'm curious.
That's a tough question. I find it so surreal and bizarre that I'm unable to process it. So you'll have to get back to me at some later stage in my life, because I feel like it's too weird.
Generally, Andy finds that side of the podcast more entertaining and surreal than anything. While for me, I am very sensitive, and so I just can't even look. So Andy's the one who knows about Reddit threads, and I just live in my bubble.
Yeah,
where I'm happier.
It's interesting. I mean, I find it very interesting. It's sociologically, it's fascinating. It gets a little weird and a little cringy sometimes when it's you they're talking about, but it's too hard for my processor to really grab onto.
Parasocial relationships are weird.
I love them because they're fun as a fan, but then being the person that people believe they have the relationship with. I think that also there's a level of sensitivity that I have where I'm like, oh, I want to engage with you, but I can only give so much.
Yeah, my big fear is disappointing people. So, like there was a lovely Shandy who stopped us on the street to tell me what I had meant to her. Like when she was in high school, it helped her find her sense of identity, seeing me on TV and reading everything I'd written and on the podcast, like just so beautiful, like the sentiment. And I gave her a hug and was so moved. But later on I cried. I got home and cried because I felt like there was no way my interaction with her could have lived up to to the pedestal she had me on in her mind. And so the parasocial relationship it's a funny dynamic. It goes both ways. It messes with you.
Erika, you have to understand we both have severe imposter syndrome. So that's got to be the lens you you ask this question through, because when you ask me about Reddit threads, I read them. It's like, if it's bad or good, I just think, oh, they're thinking too much of me. I don't deserve this hate, and I don't deserve this love.
Yes.
And when a Shandy comes up to us in the street, it's like, oh my God, I love you, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I think you're wrong. I think you've made a mistake, but I'll be nice and be gracious. And then I'll walk away and be like, did I live up to whatever she thought I was
probably a disappointment.
Yeah. I always assume I was a disappointment. I actually always assume that they consider stopping watching Dear Shandy after I say anything.
Oh, that crosses my mind every time.
Yeah, it's a severe. I'm not saying we have minor. It's a severe imposter syndrome. Yeah. So everything has to be looked through that lens. Like that's possibly why it feels surreal. I'm like, this isn't happening because I don't deserve this.
But what we've learned through having this podcast is we've like amassed this community of people who also have imposter syndrome. So we just all have imposter syndrome together, and it's actually quite nice to have that community.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, once you have enough friends who have imposter syndrome, you start feeling like maybe you're good. Like.
It comes full circle.
If it makes you feel better when people come up to me, I'm always like, okay, ask them their name, ask them about themselves, hug them, say thank you profusely, try to say their name again. I know it sounds so robotic, but just after so many interactions, I'm just like, oh my God, I'll go to whoever I'm with at the time. I'll just be like, oh my God, was I nice enough? Was I good enough? Was I nice enough? And I think because I came off as such a nice person on Survivor, similarly, I'm like, okay, I have to make sure I'm still delivering on that. So I feel like I try really hard in those interactions, and then I still wonder if I did quote unquote good enough.
I really think that if you try hard, even if you're not like the coolest person ever in the moment, I think that's always looked upon very well. I think if it's showing like you actually care, even if you're not saying exactly the right things or you're like caught off guard, I think they really appreciate that. I'm just human, not they, like I would. If I went up to some celebrity and accosted them in the street and they were like, really like, oh, hey, what's your name? I wouldn't care how sloppy they were about it. I'd feel very good.
Yeah, and above all, it's just so easy to make someone's day.
So easy.
It's incredible. That's probably the most powerful takeaway from having any kind of F-list fame.
Absolutely.
Is that someone can see you, and this brief interaction you have can make their day or their week or their month. It's like, how can you not want to give that your all?
It also doesn't matter if you're worth it. Even if you're right about your imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
you're still giving them what they want.
Yeah,
You're
well,
you're
hopefully.
giving them this free happiness. You know what would be great is a self-help group for imposter syndrome people, like a 12-step thing.
Yeah.
Where everyone's like, I'm
sure.
Andy and I'm an imposter. I have imposter syndrome, and everyone's like, oh no, you're great. And you're like, no, you don't think that. And you're like, oh, do you think me? Do you think that I think that you are an imposter? Or wait, are you saying that I'm an imposter? No, it would devolve into insanity.
I'm sure that already exists, though.
Really?
Yeah. It's probably, it's about self-worth, really.
It's a very specific self-help group.
Okay.
I feel like that's every friend group.
That's true, yeah. You're pretty. No, you're pretty. No, you don't think I'm pretty. No, I'm not pretty. You're pretty.
I know, Sharleen, you went on to the other side of reality TV recently, and you were the host of Bachelor in Paradise Canada. So you both got a front row seat into the other side of things. So through that experience, were you able to get this new perspective on reality TV?
Yes and no. I think that on one hand, I was expecting to really be on the other side of things. And what I didn't fully realize was that a host is not really a producer. I mean, they're not. I mean, unless you're Jeff Probst. I know he's very involved. There are a lot of hosts who become executive producers, and I can see why. Because otherwise, you're just sort of coming in and out, and you're just not calling any kind of shots. I fill a role. There's like a category for me that isn't for anyone else, if that makes sense. Meanwhile, it was really quite beautiful and kind of uplifting, honestly, to be able to have access to the control room and to hear the producers, rooting for certain couples and cheering people on. It was actually kind of like, oh, like I said, like you have more of a perspective of it not being like, oh, producers are all evil. It's like, oh, wow, they actually do want, of course they want drama along the way, but they actually do want something positive to come out of this. So it was actually quite heartwarming in a way.
Oh, that's nice.
Can I tell you something that I don't think I've ever said publicly before? But I also auditioned to be the host of Bachelor in Paradise Canada.
No way.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so I had signed with my agent, and then like 2 days later, she calls me and she's like, the powers that be want you to audition to host the show. And I don't know what I'm doing at all. I had never auditioned for anything, but I'm like, sure, why not? I do my self-tape. And for those who have never done a self-tape before, it's how you're supposed to film yourself either repeating lines from a script, or there's a brief that the casting director gives you. And there's a certain way you're supposed to set it up and do it. I had no idea. I also fully had COVID, but I was like, why not go for it? So I just rose from the dead, put on my makeup, my little dress, my heels. The take I submitted was the one take where I got through all the lines well. And my agent was like, considering you have no idea what you're doing and you did it wrong, it's not bad. I was like, oh, thank you.
It was a lot of lines.
Yeah.
It was a lot to memorize. And I only had a day to do it. But I was like, there's no way I'm getting this. And then I saw that you got it. And I was like, this is the perfect host. This makes all the sense in the world.
Thank you. I mean, similarly to you, it landed in my inbox. And I really didn't think I had a shot, to be honest. And we were in Miami at the time doing an opera.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I was doing the opera too.
Yeah. And Andy was with me for the podcast, but yeah, I was there doing an opera, so I was rehearsing every day, and it just really wasn't at the forefront of my mind. But the casting person, not the powers that be, actually, the casting person was like, I think they're really interested in you specifically if you could, actually do this. As I really was like, oh, this is taking too much time out of what I'm supposed to be doing, which is this opera. And yeah, it turns out that being able to memorize stuff, which is what I do for opera constantly, like in a foreign language with notes, lended itself very well to learning lines in your English language and without notes.
Yeah.
In your English language, in your native language and without notes.
Yeah. I mean, you were extremely good. at what you were doing.
I don't. It was I would do things differently if I could do it again, but it was an amazing experience. Highly recommend. I actually have a good auditioned for something and never got it story that I've never revealed. If you want me to share it now, just to meet you there. I auditioned for Tuptim in The King and I on Broadway. It was at Lincoln Center, and I didn't get it. They told me I was too operatic, and it was given to Ashley Park, who then went and was in Mean Girls on Broadway, and then was in Emily in Paris, and now she's a huge star. She's in all these movies, and she has a Skechers line. So. And she's amazingly talented. And actually, we're both good friends with Kayla Quinn, who's also from the Bachelor world. Like, I've met her a couple times. She deserves it all. But there's a good auditioned and didn't get it story for you.
That's the sliding doors moment.
Right?
The Skechers line was within your reach. But you'll get it another way.
Yeah, maybe.
But now you've got Dear Shandy.
Yes, that's true.
Better than Skechers.
Better than
Dear
Emily in
Shandy,
Paris.
better than Skechers. Definitely better than Crocs.
So I want to ask about Dear Shandy. Earlier, you were saying you have imposter syndrome, and I'm curious because there are so many people who give relationship advice out there, people who are experts, doctors, all sorts of stuff. So what is your approach to giving relationship advice on your show? And do you have imposter syndrome when you do it?
No.
Interestingly, no.
It's one of the very few things that we don't have imposter syndrome with. I think we give good advice.
Yeah, I think we give good advice too. I'm very proud of the advice we give, and that really was the seed from which Dear Shandy grew. Was actually Andy was giving my girlfriends. It came to the point where literally my girlfriends would want to hang out with me and be like, bring Andy, because I have to tell him my dating story and get his advice on what to do. Like, what does this guy like me or not? He was becoming that person just in our social network. And he would give it with just so much humor and compassion and just with this life experience that you can only get from having lived it. And I also, I had gone on reality TV and lived in Europe, dated a ton. And so we both came from this place of having had a lot of experience. And it's interesting how with experience, the imposter syndrome does not apply.
No.
Because when it comes to giving advice, and sometimes it'll be like, oh, this is what I think, but, you do you. If this doesn't read true to you, then don't listen to us. But other times it's like, oh my God, you have to do this. And it feels really good to have that kind of conviction.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, there are certain areas where we're not always perfect. Obviously, certain different cultures or, just people were brought up in much, much different ways than we were. But aside from that, the reason Sharleen and I have this really good relationship is because of all the mistakes we made leading up to this. I'm not here because I was just born to be good at being Sharleen's partner.
Yeah, we've said before that if we had met 10 years earlier, we would not have ended up together.
I made every single mistake you can make in dating, in relationships. I learned from it. And, I did the mistakes several times. And now I'm here. And I feel like we are an expert, and therefore I don't feel ever ashamed of the advice we give. And I'm speaking for you as well.
I honestly think we could never have been doing this if we didn't have that conviction. I could never give someone advice on what to do with their precious life unless I felt so certain about how I felt about it. Yeah. So it's actually the one thing within all of the the podcast can get away from you sometimes. It's a ton of work. It's a true labor of love. Yeah. But it coming from that place of just knowing how you feel about something, as someone who questions that a lot with my own life, it feels really good to have that. Yeah.
And then speaking for Sharleen, I know she does not give advice with confidence on a lot of things. She's not that kind of person who gives you unsolicited advice. Let me tell you how to do this. She's the opposite. I hate when
people do that.
She's actually too much the opposite of that. But it just makes it all the more meaningful when she's confidently giving relationship advice.
Relationships are different.
Yeah, they are.
Mm-hmm. We spend a lot of time analyzing relationship dynamics. Just in our free time.
Yeah.
And I think that the true care that you put into the advice, it really shows when you're giving people advice. When you think about all of the questions that people ask you, what do you think is at the heart of people's issues when it comes to relationships?
I know my answer. Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
I mean, I'll give a broad answer. There's so many things to say here, but I think it's a misunderstanding of wants and needs, generally speaking. I think oftentimes people put wants ahead of needs too much.
Or because maybe they haven't identified what their needs are.
Right.
And oftentimes their wants are what they've been subliminally I can't talk today, subliminally told by society to want.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's all about this outside validation versus what they actually from their heart really need to be happy. Okay, I agree with that. And for me, I think this ties in our demographic, our listener demographic, which obviously they identify with the two of us having imposter syndrome. We talk about shame a lot on our podcast. And I think that what this type of personality struggles with is choices and having choice is not always your friend. You only have one life to live. And there's a sense of grieving the paths not explored, the choices not made, the idea of breaking up with someone and regretting it, or regret comes up a lot. And so in that sense, I actually think we are uniquely able to speak to that. I don't want to say we're older than a lot. We actually have some Shandys who are older than us.
Well, some.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think most Shandys are older than us.
But, having been on the side of having lived some life, you do have a clearer picture. Like, wisdom really does come your way, and it really is priceless. And it is, I think, sometimes helpful for people to hear the truth about regret, and that you really cannot live every life, every scenario. The Choose Your Own Adventure book, you really do only get to choose one page to go to. You can't do what I used to do, which is read all of them and then decide which one.
You were the only one who did that.
Wow, life sounds so scary now, the way you put it like that. But no, it's true. but then I think because of that, then that is why people then go out and seek advice and want to make sure they're doing the right thing. Yeah. I know that, Sharleen, I had read in a blog post you wrote years ago that you had drafted an email to one of your favorite relationship advice bloggers and you had never sent it.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody who's on the fence about wanting to ask for advice, what would the two of you say to them?
Oh man, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
What's the downside?
To not hit send on that, especially if it's anonymous. Like, we always give everyone the option. When they come on as callers, they can use an alias. If they write an email, they can sign it anonymous. We will not reveal their name or anything. They can just say the region they're in. They don't even have to say the city. All we really ask for is age and gender, and then their circumstance. And why not? Like, you can live in a place of fear of what? I don't know. I don't know what you're afraid of. But it can only help you. Maybe you'll hear that piece of advice or that perspective, and maybe it'll make you more certain that you don't even agree with the advice. But sure. It just never hurts to have more information. To me, information is everything. And I really regret not hitting send on that. And I have a very good idea of what that relationship expert would have told me at the time. I think
break up with Andy.
What? It was with my ex before you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think I ended up taking the long path to the same result. And I think if I had hit send on that email, I might have saved a year of my life.
Wow.
I needed a nudge that I ended up having to give myself with more time. And I'm not, I don't have any regrets, but I don't see why not.
There you go. That's the thing. If you never ask, you never know what anybody's going to say. And there's nothing wrong with getting more information from somebody that you trust.
It's free, too.
It's free.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
yeah.
It's free.
And I'll make fun of you for free. That's an added bonus.
Yeah, I think from what we've heard, people love hearing us just debate it. Like, especially if we disagree, people love it when we disagree. Mm-hmm. Apparently it doesn't happen very often. Yeah. But they just want to hear the discussion. Sometimes we don't even give a clear answer. We're just like, this conversation was your answer. Take it at face value. Do with it what you will.
Yeah. And a lot of the questions, it's like, we always make the joke, like, if you're writing into a podcast, clearly there's something wrong. And, you know, it's like a lot of the answers are just like, stop doing the crazy thing. You know, that's what crazy is. It's like you're doing the same thing over and over again and getting a bad result and expecting someday, oh, it's going to change on the 15th time I pick the hottest guy in the bar who doesn't care about me, you know. So there are common themes throughout these questions, and we try as gently as possible to steer them away from disaster.
And this is when people break up with their partner because of the two of you.
That's right. That's right. We should have like one of those counters like Dear Shandy, now, you know, 7,421 breakups.
For what it's worth, we actually some of the time are really like, there's no problem here. You're making a problem where there isn't one.
Sure.
And it's funny, sometimes we'll have a caller come on and we'll be like, you don't need to break up. I don't think you should break up. And she'll be like, I thought for sure you're going to say break up. And we're like, we don't always say break up, I swear.
You need a tally of both of them to see how many breakups and then how many long-lasting, loving relationships come as a result.
Yeah. At the end of the day, not every relationship ends up with a happily ever after, you know? And I really believe that those breakups shape you and equip you better to not only find, but know that you have found the right thing for you down the road.
95% of the time, a breakup is a good thing.
99.
Okay.
99.9.
Ooh, wow, that's very high.
Well, I want to ask about how the two of you maintain your relationship while you're doing the work, because even though it's free and I know you both enjoy it, it's still work having the podcast. So how do you balance both sides of that between the two of you?
Ooh, that's definitely the greatest challenge of having a podcast. I mean, we do everything in our apartment that you can see now. And we set up and break down. We don't have a studio. It looks like you're in a lovely studio.
Oh, no, I'm in an office that has just so much crap behind me.
Yeah, but it's purple. The purple works very nicely.
Yeah,
Thank
is
you.
that
It
lighting?
looks much more professional.
It's light, yeah.
Wow, that's really well done.
I will say this. There was one thing that I did not learn about relationships when I met Sharleen, and that's how to have a business with your spouse or your partner. And that's been a real baptism by fire for both of us.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty proud of us because we've definitely been through some shit with this.
Yeah.
But we've worked through it and we're doing great. I mean, it's hard.
It is. Literally, we record right over there. And you can see the arms of our mics over there. I like set it up, break it down, set it up, break it down. I edit upstairs at the desk, which is near our bed. It's all done in-house. And it started out that way because we started in the pandemic. I was out of opera work, obviously, and feeling like, oh, well, if not now, then when? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's challenging, you know, to draw that line. Like sometimes I would say not common. This has happened a handful of times where in the evening, I'm like, okay, it's off hours. You know, we're not talking about it. Andy's like, oh, this thing about the podcast. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about the podcast. You know, it's like a lot of like boundary laying and knowing each other and how we function sometimes with pressure. You know, there's deadlines and expectations, and the bigger it gets, the more pressure there is. And I'm actually very proud of us too. And I think some people have this romantic idea that the podcast brings a couple, like doing something like this brings you closer. And while I think it's brought us closer in that I think I understand him better and I know what makes him tick better than before, I think that the best possible outcome is that it hasn't hurt us.
Right. The best you can do in a business, in a marriage, is to not go down.
Yeah.
You cannot go up. A business is not going to make your relationship better. Like, oh, this is all we needed to do was to be stressed out about making money together. How did I not know that?
Yeah. No,
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's a very good example of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're not dead, so we're stronger.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
I get so many questions from people about starting a podcast. And I know that when you both first started Dear Shandy during the pandemic, Sharleen, you wrote a blog post outlining all of the fears in detail that you had about the podcast. So now that you're a few years in, have any of those fears been realized?
I'm trying to remember what my fears were. I think that they were probably the imposter syndrome thing.
Failure,
And also a poor like ROI
Yeah.
just from like a practical standpoint. But I mean, whatever, that is what it is. I think my biggest fear was, like I said, meeting someone and being a disappointment to them. Is just like exposing more of myself to people and having them be like, oh, you're different than I thought, and not in a good way. I want less of that. And it's funny, like all of the hopes have been realized and all of the fears have been realized, except the hopes have been realized so many more times over. And the fears that have been realized, it's like here and there. And it's been an exercise, like a personal exercise for me with my personality type, to not let it get the best of me. There are people, I have gotten messages that were like, I thought you were this way and now I see you're this. That can be really upsetting to read, especially if you're a sensitive person like myself. And Andy's been great. Like, this is one way in which I think it has strengthened us. He's really good at forcing me to focus on what matters. And when 99% of people are like, I love this, I only want more, like, why am I getting hung up on that 1% that clearly just wants to make me feel bad about myself? So I guess the answer is that all of those things have come true, but they're less scary than they were before.
Very nice.
Wow, the growth. We love that. We love a growth moment.
Yes, we do. How about you, Erika? Did you have any fears going into this?
Oh, you're afraid of everything when you go into it. You're afraid that no one's going to listen. You're afraid everyone's going to think that it sucks or they're not getting anything out of it. You're afraid that no one wants to be on your show. You're afraid you're just going to be spending all this money, because there is a big financial investment at the beginning.
Top. Yes.
And you're just afraid that it's just going to be a waste and that nobody cares. And also, my first episode was an episode I actually recorded when I first finished watching my season of Survivor, but because of my contract, I couldn't release it. So I waited a year later and I released it. And then I was thinking, oh, are people going to think she's not relevant anymore? Who cares? Stop talking about this. Or you're crazy. You're just making all this up. So yeah, I was scared of everything. But then, yes, I still constantly have fears about certain things, but it turns out it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And there are actually a lot of really positive moments, and I have gotten good feedback.
Isn't that interesting how the unknown is so much scarier than reality? Like, the fear of the unknown really is debilitating, especially when the unknown is just like, you did it. It really wasn't that scary. I love how at the ready your fears were, though. That was great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Any topic, if you ask me what I'm scared of, I have them all bulleted. I can alphabetize them however you want.
I just asked her an off the cuff question, and she's like, well, my fears are.
I've been waiting to talk about everything I'm scared of.
Couldn't wait.
Well, Sharleen and Andy, it was so great speaking to both of you, and both of you actually exceeded the expectations, so you don't have to worry about letting me down today.
You're lying to us.
Don't believe it.
Yeah.
I know, I'm going to call your sister after and be like, it was awful.
No, this was so fun.
Yeah, this is great.
I
Thank
love
you.
connecting with fellow Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Asian Canadian women on American reality TV.
Oh, yes.
Let's go.
Yeah. And also just the reality TV circuit. Like, it's just such a cool family. There are some Survivor people in the city here that I'm friends with. And I watched you on your season, and it was so badass to watch you go through it. Like, that was challenging. I couldn't have done it.
And a belated congratulations.
Yeah.
I did not see your
Thank
season,
you.
but what a cool thing you did.
Yeah, it's a cool,
You won.
Good bragging right for
Yeah,
life.
that's a big
I'm
deal.
sorry we spoiled it for you, Andy.
Yeah, it's okay.
If people want to keep up with what both of you are doing, where can they find you?
Oh, so we are Dear Shandy, spelled Shandy. It's a mix of our names, Sharleen and Andy. And we're on Instagram at Dear Shandy, and we're on YouTube. All our episodes are video ever since episode 1.
Yeah.
We've been doing that to ourselves.
Always video.
Yeah, I'm at Sharleen Joynt, Joynt, and Andy's at Machine Levine. And yeah, relationships. We love talking about it.
Yeah, right in.
There you
Tune
go.
in.
Don't be scared. Tune in.
Yeah. What have you got to lose?
Sharleen and Andy have really reassured me that everybody has imposter syndrome. So if you have imposter syndrome ever, know that you're not alone. So thank you both to Sharleen and Andy for being on the podcast this week. I also want to thank the listeners for submitting questions. So this week, the listener question is, what's in your regular podcast rotation? So thank you for being interested in what I listen to. And I really had to think about it because I tend to go through phases where I listen to podcasts for a while and then I move on and listen to something else. One podcast that I always listen to is Know Your Aura with Mystic Michaela. Mystic Michaela was a guest on my podcast on episode 24. And it's a lot of fun learning about spirituality and aura colors. And I love listening to it because I feel like I learn a lot about myself and I can learn information that helps me to understand the people around me. And I learn information about how to live in an aligned and authentic way. So that is one. I'm pretty sure I've listened to every single episode of that one. And that one is a always regular rotation, no matter what. The podcast I'm listening to right now, so in terms of wanting to learn about the world and keep my brain going, I love listening to There Are No Girls on the Internet. So it's a tech podcast that really focuses on marginalized voices in tech and the point of view of how tech could help or hurt them. And they go over the headlines of the day. In some episodes, they have a deeper dive into a topic. So I love that because I love to make sure that I'm always getting information that helps me to think critically about everything that I'm seeing online. I also always check into the Oprah Super Soul podcast, Super Soul Conversations. I think it's that. And that's where I want to hear, something inspirational, something that, can motivate me and can help me feel excited about the future and what's to come. And then there are a couple that I listen to for business. So I'll listen to the Goal Digger podcast, which is focused on entrepreneurship and small business and being able to grow your business that way. And then I love to throw in a comedy podcast. So right now I've been listening to Sounds Like a Cult. And then they talk about different interests, different groups, and whether or not they have cult-like tendencies. So thank you for asking about what I listen to. I also think after this episode, we should all be listening to Dear Shandy. I have listened to Dear Shandy before, and honestly, the chemistry that you heard on this episode, you will hear that in all of their episodes. So definitely go and check out Dear Shandy. So thank you everybody who has listened this week, and thank you to the listener for submitting a question. If you haven't already, I would love if you could subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, the podcast is on YouTube. It's at Happy to See Me on YouTube. And follow us on Instagram. It's at Happy to See Me. Thank you for tuning in, and I will be happy to see you on Monday.